Hello, welcome to Yesterday's Airlines. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the JC Wings August announcements, which were announced probably a couple of weeks ago now, probably. Now, JC Wings, I keep on hoping that they're going to be expanding the models they're making, producing a wider range of aircraft on different molds and different types, because they've got such an impressive mold catalogue there. And so far this year, to be honest, haven't really seen that from them. Last month, there were a couple of really interesting models, but amongst a sea of quite ordinary releases too. And this month, I have to say that that pattern kind of follows. In fact, possibly it's a worse set than last month. There's a lot of models here that they've made before. And there's a lot of competition for what they're making as well. And that makes it a bit of a fight for JC to get the attention, I feel. Now, they are super keen on keeping market share, so historically they have released similar models to other brands, partly as a way of damaging sales from the other brands and holding market share. I'm not sure that is necessarily what's going on this month. I think that it's just the case that because they often release two models, they're very similar, and they split them across a much wider timescale than, say, NG models do, that, you know, a few years later, one of them will pop up and it'll be very similar to a release they made before. And there's quite a bit of that this month. But much like last month also, there's a significant amount of future releases being announced as well. So it does feel that JC are kind of on the cusp for me. They're gradually emptying that warehouse of a lot of older stock, and they're announcing more and more new models. So let's get in and have a look at what it is JC are going to be flying our way in the next few months. And before I do that, obviously, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and chuck a like on the video if you're enjoying the content. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at @YestAirlines, and also check out Facebook and the websites. If you're interested in the bigger scale as well, then I did just post a review of a 200 scale model, which I don't do very often, but it's not always just 400 scale at Yesterday's Airlines. Mostly it is, but there's quite a bit of 600 scale, and there's a smattering of 200 scale stuff as well. And in fact, there will also be a much larger model getting a look in the next week or two as well. Okay, well, let's get on and check out these JC releases. Okay, it's the old Airbus then Boeing pattern, and illustrating that this month's set are not especially diverse. It is all Airbus and Boeing. There's nothing but Airbus and Boeing. That's a bit of a shame when you've got such a large mold catalogue, and I'd like to be seeing, you know, more regional aircraft, more Russian types, more unusual props, this kind of stuff, you know. They've got the molds. It would be nice to see better use of them. But anyway, we're going to start off with a couple of A321neos, and if you've watched any of these videos, then you know that I don't like the JC Wings A321neo, or indeed many of their neo molds, mainly because of the size of the engines. The first release that we have up here is China Airlines B18101, and as with a lot of the models this month, we've got a picture of the actual release, so we can talk about that. I guess ostensibly it doesn't look shocking, but the engines are still way too big. And the big issue for me here really is very much that this model has been released by others better beforehand. This is not the first China Airlines Neo to be made. It has been made by Panda models for Albatross in Taiwan. It has been made by NG models twice. It has been made by HYJL Wings as well. So you've got 4 other releases, all on better molds than this one, and surely you've required one of them. And if you didn't get one of those, you'd have probably just got the sister ship to this one, 18102, which JC Wings released back in 2021. So this model just seems completely superfluous in the sense that it's been made quite a lot of times beforehand, and the mold's really poor. So yeah, I'm just going to put this one down into gas guzzler. Next up, we've got a Spring Airlines A321neo B30 Foxtrot Zulu, and this suffers from exactly the same issues that the China Airlines one does. This is not the new Spring Airlines scheme, by the way, which is quite nice. This is the old Spring Airlines scheme, and part of the reason for that is that they've released an A321neo JC wings, exactly the same as this one. They released that in 2020, and that was B30 Echo uniform. But again, HYJL wings, sorry, have made this already as well, as have Panda models. So you'd have probably got one of those. I indeed got the Panda release, and there's no reason to look at this one. And so I'm going to gas guzzle this one as well. So not a spectacularly good start there for JC this month. That at least gets us out of the A321neos though, and we've got an A321ceo up next, and this one's in the colours of Thomas Cook. And if it feels like I say that quite a lot on these JC Wings videos, it's because I do. They like Thomas Cook. This one is G Tango Charlie Delta Whiskey, and it's got I think it's the breast cancer pink ribbon behind the titles. It's got the heart tail scheme to it, so it's the later Thomas Cook livery. And when you look at Thomas Cook A321s in the scale, they've all been made by JC Wings or Gemini, except for one model. So this is the fifth made by JC Wings or Gemini, and four of those were JC. There's one by Gemini and there's one by Phoenix. So none of them are really spectacular at all. This is definitely a different livery variant, and obviously JC have made several livery variants, though all the other ones do have sharklets and this one does not. So that does make this one a little bit unusual. It's the only one of all the releases that doesn't have sharklets. The mold's the same mold as the Neo, except it's got slightly better engines on it. Yeah, it's fine, but it's deeply workhorse, isn't it? Next, we have a model which, and I saw someone point out, does anyone even remember Dragonair? I'd like to think they did. It didn't disappear that long ago, but it's not exactly an uncommon release in the scale. There have been 25 previous Dragonair A330-300s. Now, a lot of those have had special schemes. This one does not. B Hotel Yankee Alpha. Again, this is clearly a model which JC have had stored away for some time. They released B Hotel Yankee Foxtrot in 2021. And they released B Hotel Lima Lima the same year. There have been plenty of other Dragonair A330s that I'm not really sure why you'd focus on this one. The JC mold for an A330 is fine, but it's pretty ordinary and it's certainly not as good as competition. So, again, it's all adding up to be very workhorse and nothing really to see here. Now that takes us out of the Airbuses that are going to be coming soon and into Boeing territory, but things don't really improve dramatically in this space, because first up we've got a KLM 737-300, it's PHBDH. Now they've released a KLM 737-300 wearing this same livery last year. Now the difference between the two, that one was BDA, is that one had the SkyTeam logo after the KLM titles, and this one has the Northwest KLM logo after the titles. So it's a pretty small difference between the pair. Not a big enough difference that I'm going to go out and buy another one. I did get the original release. So again, you know, it's workhorse. These are just sitting in that area. Next up, firmly also workhorse, is Thai Airways International 737-400 HS Tango Delta Delta. They've already made HS Tango Delta Golf in the same scheme. They made it in 2022. This one was obviously made at the same time. Nothing more to say. Workhorse. So there's a lot of workhorse propping up in this group of releases. And the last 737 is a MAX, but that doesn't fundamentally change that status of the release. This one is a Aerolíneas Argentinas LV Golf Victor Delta. But again, last year they made Hotel Kilo Victor. Can't see any differences between the pair. I like the Max mold, love this Argentina scheme, but it is the same as they made previously, a model which is probably still available. The only other people who've made an Argentine Max is Aero Classics, so we can discount that one. But nonetheless, it was good last year. I probably gave it a really good score, but this year it's just workhorse. Now that brings us in, finally, I should say, that brings us into slightly more interesting territory. with some 747s. And the first one up is an Air China 747-200. It's a combi, and it is registered B2446. Now, what is interesting about this is that this model is apparently exactly the same as a release that was just made in June for a company called Undefined Collectibles, who are a new brand inside China, selling China locally. And it's a little cheeky probably of JC Wings to be releasing effectively exactly the same model in their own box, but it's not unheard of. They've done this before. They did it with the YUC models, CAAC MD80 as well, so it's kind of typical JC behaviour. Having said all of that, this is the old mould, the old kind of Big Birdie mould, so it's got a seam, but the model looks really nice. There haven't been a lot of Air China 747s, not 200s anyway, and this one actually is one which I really like the look of. So for me, this one is creeping up into high flyer territory. I didn't get the Undefined Collectibles model because it's on Taobao and such. I mean, I do buy from Taobao quite a bit, but I just never got around to getting that one. So I may well get this one if it's easier to acquire. Next up is a model which is probably going to cause, or has caused, quite a lot of discussion, good and bad, because it's a fantasy release. I know some people really don't like them, some people love them, but lots of people go, why are they releasing fantasy releases when they haven't made X or Y or Z? Those views are perfectly valid, but all I can do is talk about the model that's available here. And this one is an American Airlines 747-8 Intercontinental, and they've registered N748AA, which is a good enough fantasy registration. The model looks good. It looks nice. Everything looks good in this classic American Vignelli scheme, let's be honest. There's no place for such models in my collection. It doesn't have even a toehold in reality, but it does look super nice. So, what do you do with that from a scoring perspective? I'm going to put it into high flyer. I think that it's a bold choice. It's an interesting choice. At least there's something here in this set which is raising your eyebrow. Maybe not your pulse, but raising your makes an eyebrow raise. And hey, I'm not against fantasy models. JC have clearly shown an interest. They recently made the Cathay Pacific lettuce sandwich one, didn't they? And I don't have a big problem with it. Looks like it'll be nice. Not for me, but I completely understand why people might like to get it. The other 747 this month is also an 8, but this time a freighter. It's Cargo Lux, so not exactly surprising. It is a Victor Charlie Foxtrot. That's the not without my mask liveried aircraft. So cast your mind back to COVID. It seems like a long time ago, but that was the aircraft, probably the first aircraft I think that got the COVID mask on it. Now, it's obviously been made previously, but as with, I think, some of the 748s last month, there is more interest here than initially meets the eye. It was made by Phoenix, and the mold isn't spectacularly good. It was made by Gemini as an interactive version. And I know, as I've said before, unless you're going to display those interactive versions with the doors open, they're kind of pointless. This is the first time that it's been made by JC as a standard release, and it does look like it's on the updated 747-8 freighter mold with the modified hump, so the hump is definitely looking better. So this looks like it will be a super nice release. Again, it's not fitting my criteria, but I could understand interest like this, and I like the look of the model. So looks good, hasn't really been made as well as this before, and as I say, was with an interactive. So I'm willing to put this one in high flyer as well, I think. I think I said last month, good to see a standard version comparing with the interactive version, albeit substantial years between the two. Okay, and that takes us out of the 747s, which have been, for me, so far the highlight of this set, and moves us back into quite familiar territory. We've got a 757 up next. It's Britannia Airways. We've had a few of these from them already. Now, the aircraft is supposed to be GBYAK with the Keep Duty Free tiles. But interestingly, when I look at the image here, I can't see the Keep Duty Free tiles on the picture that JC have provided. Not sure why that is. It's a mystery that I don't care about, though. NG Models have made the Keep Duty Free version of the Britannia 757. They made it a long time ago, mainly in 2019. And JC have made 2 previous Britannia 757s. So, not exactly, the one of them did have a different nose cone, but not exactly, knocking your socks off here. The mould, it's old, new undercarriage. It's not AMG mould, is it? So, workhorse in that one too. We've also got a single 767-200 here, but again, it's not unique because they made an Air Canada 762 not that long ago, and this is another one. Last year they made the Gimli Glider. This year they're making CGAUB, still wearing the delivery scheme. This was the first 762 delivered to Air Canada. Fundamentally looks exactly the same as the Gimli Glider, and there have been earlier versions made by Aero Classics as well. So, yeah, it's workhorse. Like he was saying, workhorse a lot in this video, but these models are fitting the definition. Now, the next 2 models may be somewhat controversial. The first one up is a 767-400. Obviously, we've talked a bit about the lack of quality of the JC Wings Gemini 767-400 mould, but there is a clamour to get these releases out there, and some people are still liking it and buying lots of them, even though there's competition from Panda and NG. This one is United Airlines, and it's modern, and it's N76064, and that's highly unusual because usually JC don't get to release modern aircraft, do they? Because Gemini don't like that, especially American ones. But this time they do, and the reason they do is because it's got this Denver Broncos aspect to it, and of course that probably would require further licensing. And historically, if JC on Gemini want to make a model, but they don't want to get licensing for it, Gemini will give permission for JC to slip it out under their brand. We've seen this previously with the breast cancer American Airlines models, for example. So it's a little sneaky, especially considering the whinging and moaning about the lack of licensing from other brands. Regardless, what do you think about the model itself? Well, it looks fine from the picture, but at the same time, it's on this substandard mould. That would not necessarily damage its ranking in my videos if it hadn't also been announced by somebody else. And it has. Panda models have announced this exact same model. It's hard to say who's going to be out the soonest, but fundamentally, the Panda version will be better. So, I don't like this model much. And I'm going to workhorse this one too. But mainly for that reason, and because there's a better competing product being released elsewhere at roughly the same sort of time. Now, the next model is even more controversial because it's MH370, isn't it? It's the Malaysian 777 N9MMR Oscar, so the aircraft which was lost and has yet to be found. Now, I talked about in the NG video the pasting NG models got for suggesting they were releasing this. Same month, and JC are releasing it. Now, it's not quite as clear as that. I'm told that this is a model that was made a while ago for a retailer and they never paid up. And so there's a smallish production run of this, I think less than 200 models, which has been hanging around, and JC Wings has decided to slip it out. Now, obviously, they go about it in a slightly subtle way. They don't say the name of the aircraft or the airline in their release material, but the pictures clearly show what it is. Nobody's going to be fooled by that. Where's the clamour from Chinese social media against this model, and it's all awful and evil and everything? I haven't heard about it. Double standards? Yeah, probably. From my perspective, I don't have a big issue with the release, and in fact, I've not seen a dramatic issue from West End collectors. I think that it's probably a good release, and the model looks nice. It does come in a non-standard JC box, probably because they made it for someone else originally. I'm willing to put this into High Flyer. I don't have an issue with the model being made myself. Okay, just two more models to talk about in the released within the next couple of months, and one of these is another 777. This time it's a freighter. It's Lufthansa Cargo, D Alpha Lima Foxtrot Golf, and it is the sustainable aviation fuel version. This has been made already by NG Models, but it is interactive. But interactive on the 777 doesn't mean that much. You just get the kind of, because it's in the nose cargo door. There have been quite a few Lufthansa Cargo 777 freighters. In fact, there have been, this is the 15th, so they're pretty common. Yeah, it's not doing much for me, even though it is interactive. And it has been made before, though not interactive. Yeah, I'm tempted to. This one's, I'm going to workhorse it as well, though this one could be high flyer, I think, if you really want that interactive aspect. And the last model of the month, Boeing House Colours. It's a 777-300. It is N5014 kilo, and this one comes in flaps up and flaps down. And I should have mentioned that some of those previous models almost certainly were also coming in flaps up and flaps down, and I forgot to. But let me just check the list. Oh, maybe none of them were. None of them were. Sorry, apologies. This is the first and only flaps up and flaps down model from the immediate releases. Now, I'm really keen on this one. I've got a Phoenix version of this, but I think this version should be better because I prefer the JC Wings mold. My only concern with it is that the pictures are showing an aircraft with a grey nose cone, and for the life of me, I can't find any images of this aircraft in real life that have a grey nose cone. The stripes always go around the nose cone. So I'm not sure if this is accurate. But then again, there aren't that many mod pictures of this aircraft in service with Boeing and the test program, so it could be. But I'd love if someone could find a picture with the grey nose cone. So that's my challenge to you, listeners and watchers, is to find a picture of this aircraft with a grey nose cone and no cheat lines running around the nose cone. And then I may well go and buy this model. In the meantime, I'm willing to give it a benefit of the doubt. I'm going to put it into high flyer, but I probably would have supersonic this if I was certain that it actually existed in real life. So I'm not. I'll high flyer it because I'm not entirely sure. Okay, and that brings us to the end of a list of 16 models, and there isn't a single supersonic in the bunch, so it's not an outstanding month so far. But as I said at the start, there is a selection of future releases also to be discussed, 8 in fact, and so let's get on and see if those guys can find a bit more speed. So what has JC got for us in this future release space? Now, before I go through these, obviously, as always, who knows when these models are going to appear? And that does weigh on my mind somewhat, especially because JC doesn't tend to tell you when they do finally come out. They just kind of dribble out and you could easily miss them. But let's look at them with fresh eyes. It doesn't start especially well because we start with a Neo before he moaned about the Neo mould and engines. And this is an A320, not a 21, but it doesn't really make a difference. So the aircraft is LATAM. It's LATAM Brazil, and it's got the green scheme on it, which is actually probably nicer, to be honest, than the standard colours. It's registered PR X-Ray Bravo Golf. Not sure. I think I'll just workhorse this one because of the mould. I know I gas guzzle those A321s, but some of the Neo A320s have been looking a bit better, and yeah, I'll workhorse it. But it's on the edge. Next up, there's a Vueling A320, and this one's got a special scheme. Born this way, fly this way. I don't know what that scheme relates to, and it isn't that exciting. The Vueling otherwise have got a really boring scheme in keeping with the majority of Spanish airlines. This one's registered EC Lima Victor Sierra. There's not been a lot of whaling in 400 scale to date. This is only the 6th model, and almost all of them that have been made are not overly impressive. But there was a A320 made by Gemini on the same mould as this back in June 2016. In fact, was it the same mould? Maybe it's so old it's not. Oh no, it's not actually. It's so old that it's actually not the same mould as this. So there hasn't been a lot of whaling for a long time. In fact, this is the first whaling release in 7 years. Surprise that there hasn't been other whaling models considering the airline. But it's not an airline I like, not overly sold in this scheme, and I'm going to workhorse it regardless of that. So who cares? Next up, we've got an A321neo. So you'd expect me to be gas guzzling that one. It's Etihad. It's got this 20 years scheme, A6AN. Now, I'm not going to gas guzzle this one. In fact, I'm minded to put this one up in the high flyer. And maybe that's just complete stupidity. But when you look at the scheme, it looks really nice. And I've always preferred, of all the Gulf carriers, Etihad has far and away got the nicest livery, I think. So, yeah, maybe I'm just being naive and stupid. It'll probably turn out looking awful. But I'm going to put it into high flyer. I mean, who knows when it will be out anyway. Don't know. That's the small Airbuses out of the way. And the 4th model is a Comac 919. We haven't seen a lot of Comacs recently, and that's because you're just not getting any of them delivered. But this one is delivered. It is China Southern's first C919. It is registered, B919 Juliet. I'm interested in this, but I've just seen that Phoenix have announced a new C919 mold themselves, and I think they're announcing this model too, so I'm almost tempted to get theirs just to make a comparison. Not sure. Quite like it. Like Chinese Airlines, obviously, and it's good to see a bit of diversity, even if you think the C919 is just an A320 copy. So I'm going to put this one high flyer, and hopefully it's not forever until it arrives. So halfway through the future releases and still no supersonics, but the last 4 actually I think are all very deserving models and highlight, or will eventually anyway, highlight some of JC's best molds. And I'm tempted to supersonic all 4 of them actually. So let's have a look at those. These are almost a saving grace in many ways of the release set, but you've got to bear in mind that they're going to be out quite a long time in the future, and there will be competition from others almost certainly by the time that they are about. But first up, we've got a Maersk Air Cargo 777 freighter. It's interactive. The reg is OYMAC. Nobody else ever made it. It's a cool scheme. It's got the interactive bit. It's all fresh. Great mould. Supersonic. Next up, there's an Avianca 787-8. This one has got some form of biodiversity related scheme on it. N799AV. It comes flaps up and flaps down. Cool scheme. No one else has made it. Great mould. Again, they're all kind of got that thing going for it. So I'm willing to supersonic it as well. Maybe I'm just losing my mind at the end of the video. I don't know. Next one, Korean Air, a 787-10. It's their first 787-10, HL8515. Exactly the same. It's not been made yet, though I think Phoenix just announced it. It's going to be coming in flaps up and flaps down. It's a great mould. Lovely scheme. Supersonic. And finishing off this bunch, we've got an Etihad 787 as well. Again, it's a 10. Again, flaps up and flaps down. A6 BM Alpha is the reg. And this one's got this Warner Brothers World scheme, which on the port side has got classic Looney Tunes characters like Tassie Devil and I think even Bugs Bunny, and it's also got Tom and Jerry I think too. And on the right hand side you've got some DC characters on there, Superman and such. So different scheme on either side, really nice livery, and you've still got that cool Etihad base scheme as well. So again, I think that's supersonic worthy, but again it probably has been announced, I think maybe also by Phoenix. So again, there's quite a bit of competition here. Maybe by the time these finally get to you, they will no longer be supersonic because they'll have been released by others. But for the time being, I'm willing to put those up into supersonic. So, there we are, basically. For this month, the standard releases that will be out in a month or two, in my opinion, very lackluster. A lot of duplication from previous years. The only real justification is that they're finally, hopefully, emptying this warehouse out of stuff they've already made. Highlights of the 747s for me. And the future releases, colourful, bit more interesting, not always on the best moulds, but the wide bodies look like they should be great. The only problem is obviously it could be years before they arrive, hopefully not. So, not a spectacular month from JC Wings at all. I'm still hopeful that upcoming months will have a more diverse, more interesting set than they have been able to produce this month, and in fact a good chunk of this year. There's always some nice stuff to be found in here, but there is a lot of repetition. So, yeah, could do better, hopefully will do better. Now, that's it for this video for this month. As I mentioned, Phoenix have announced their August releases, and I will be doing a video on that in the next week or so. So keep an eye out for that. Also keep an eye out for new content at the site, published most days. So there's always something new to see. But that's it from me for now. Thanks very much, guys. I'll speak to you next time.